Imagine you're standing on the edge of a fast-moving river. Two groups of people are trapped on opposite sides. One side has a single person, wealthy, well-connected, influential. The other side has five people, all ordinary, unknown, poor. You have the equipment and time to rescue only one group before the river sweeps the others away. Saving the five seems like the obvious choice. After all, 5 lives versus one. But then you're told the one person is a brilliant scientist on the verge of a breakthrough that could save millions of lives. Or maybe they're a policymaker who can prevent a war. Or maybe they're your close friend or sibling. Now, what seemed like a simple numbers game becomes murky. Should you prioritize the many over the one? Or the potential impact of the one over the immediate lives of the five? Should wealth or status ever play a role in moral decisions? What if the five were all children and the one was very old? What if the five were criminals and the one was innocent? And now, imagine the twist. You're not actually choosing who to save. You're designing an AI rescue system that will make this decision automatically for generations to come. How do you program it? Do you encode a formula for the value of life? A moral heuristic? Do you want it to ask how much someone earns? Or how many followers they have? Or would that horrify you? The unequal rescue asks not just who we save, but what we're really saying about what we value. Imagine you could erase a painful memory. Maybe it's a heartbreak, a betrayal, a traumatic event, something that lingers in the background of your life, shaping your behavior, your fears, your decisions. Now imagine there's a clinic where, for a price, that memory could be precisely targeted and removed. Gone. As if it never happened. You walk out of the clinic and feel lighter. You can't quite place why, but something in your chest has unclenched. There's more space in your mind, more freedom. The weight is gone, but so is the story. Here's the thought experiment. Should you do it? If pain shapes growth and identity is a collection of memory and response, then by removing the pain, are you also removing who you were becoming? Let's say the memory made you more cautious in relationships, or more empathetic toward others, or more committed to justice. Are those traits still real if the event that sparked them no longer exists in your mind? But consider the other side. What if the memory is so painful that it keeps you stuck, triggers anxiety, causes depression, prevents you from trusting, or sleeping, or being present? What if the memory is less like a teacher and more like a captor? In that case, would erasing it be a form of healing or denial? Would people begin erasing the pain of breakups, failures, guilt? Could society reach a point where emotional resilience disappears because no one carries scars? Or maybe people would become too willing to erase, removing memories of mistakes, responsibility, or consequences. A new kind of moral escape. Now, imagine a world where memory deletion is common. How do you trust anyone's past? How do you trust your own? If you delete a memory and later face a situation similar to the one you've forgotten, do you repeat the mistake? Does the body remember what the mind does not? And what if, deep down, the memory still echoes? In dreams, in irrational fears, in gut instincts? Would you still be haunted by something you no longer understand? Here's the final twist. If you could delete just one memory but had to choose right now, would you? And if so, which one? Imagine a world before birth, but instead of the classic philosophical setup where you know nothing about who you will be, this version offers you complete, unsettling clarity. You see your entire life ahead of you, every detail, your body, your health, your height, your gender, your ethnicity, your economic status, your intelligence, your personality quirks, your trauma, your family, your lifespan. You're told, this is who you will be. You don't get to change it. There's no appeal process, no re-roll. This is your life. It hasn't started yet, but it's already yours. You haven't lived a single second of it, and yet it's entirely in your hands. Now you're given one task. Design the rules of the world. How should society work? Who should get what? Who deserves help? Who doesn't? What's fair? What's justice? You know exactly where you fit into the system. You're not guessing. You're not designing blindly. You have full context, full bias, full self-interest. This is the reverse veil of ignorance. In the original version, by philosopher John Rawls, the veil keeps you blind. You're supposed to imagine designing a fair society without knowing if you'll be rich or poor, strong or weak, privileged or oppressed. The idea is that ignorance forces fairness, because if you could be anyone, you'd probably create rules that protect the least well off. You'd hedge your bets. You'd build safety nets. But in this reversed version, ignorance is gone. You know everything. And now the challenge becomes different, more difficult, more personal. Can you look directly at your life, your future life, and still design a system that is fair to others? Let's say you're going to be born into wealth with access to elite education, excellent healthcare, stable family, and social capital. Do you build a system that preserves your advantages? Do you lower taxes on the rich/public spending, deregulate, and ensure that your status stays secure? Or do you look past your own success and create a system that lifts those who won't have your fortune? Or suppose you know you'll be born into poverty, with limited education, food insecurity, and a short life expectancy. Do you design a system that forcibly redistributes wealth, that taxes the rich heavily, that prioritizes your needs? Is it fair now because it helps you? Is it justice, or is it revenge? The reverse veil doesn't remove bias, it magnifies it. It forces you to confront your own interests in the most intimate way possible. There's no hiding behind abstractions or principles. Your vote on how society should work is now tied directly to you, to your future, to your pain or your comfort, to your struggle or your power. And so, the thought experiment becomes a mirror. It asks, what do you do when you know exactly what you stand to lose or gain? Can you rise above your bias? Can you empathize with others even when you don't have to? Can you resist the pull of self-interest when it's staring you in the face? And even deeper, what kind of fairness do you believe in? Is fairness about giving everyone the same opportunities, even if they don't all start at the same place? Is fairness about equality of outcome, where the end result matters more than the initial conditions? Is fairness simply doing what you can for yourself and letting others do the same? The reverse veil exposes the raw, unfiltered relationship between identity and ethics. It doesn't just ask what kind of society is fair, it asks what kind of person you are. Moral luck is a thought experiment that asks a deceptively simple question. How much control do we really have over how we're judged morally? We like to believe we're judged by our intentions, our decisions, and our character. But what if we're also judged, perhaps even more, by things we can't control at all? Imagine two surgeons. Both are highly trained, competent, and careful. On a given day, each performs a difficult but routine surgery. They've both done this operation dozens of times before. They've both studied, practiced, and prepared the same way. The difference is that one patient makes a full recovery, while the other dies unexpectedly on the operating table due to an undetectable, rare complication. Despite identical choices and equally good intentions, one surgeon goes home relieved and praised, while the other is investigated, questioned, and left carrying the weight of a tragedy. The outcome was out of their hands, but the moral judgment shifts completely. The first surgeon is seen as a professional, the second possibly negligent. But were their actions really different? This is the unsettling space of moral luck, where people's moral status is influenced by luck, chance, and circumstances beyond their control. Even though the surgeons were equally diligent and ethical, we feel differently about them simply because of what happened. We don't just judge people by what they meant to do, we judge them by what actually happened. This applies far beyond medicine. Consider two people who both try to help an elderly person cross the street. One succeeds, and it's seen as a kind act. The other slips, unintentionally causes the person to fall, and ends up injuring them. The first person is thanked, the second might feel guilty, even ashamed, perhaps even sued. Same action, same motive, different outcomes. And yet, we feel that one person has done good and the other has done harm. Philosophers call this kind of situation resultant moral luck, where the consequences of your actions, even if beyond your control, influence your moral standing. But there are other kinds of moral luck too. Take circumstantial moral luck. Imagine someone who grows up in a quiet, peaceful society. They never face war, never encounter any deep ethical conflict, and live a quiet life without having to make morally challenging decisions. Now imagine someone born into a time of social collapse, war, or systemic injustice, where moral compromise is unavoidable, and survival itself might involve participating in morally questionable actions. The second person may be forced into situations where every decision is painful. The first might seem more virtuous, but only because they were never tested. Should we really say one is a better person than the other? Or are they just products of very different circumstances? Then there's constitutive moral luck, the kind of luck that makes you you. Your temperament, your patience, your empathy, your impulsiveness, your fears. These things are deeply ingrained in us, shaped by genetics and early experiences. We say people should make better choices, but some people are naturally better at making good decisions through no effort of their own. Are they better people or just lucky? And finally, causal luck. The way everything that ever happened before you were born set up the conditions of your life. From the language you speak, to the culture you're born into, to the people who influenced your earliest views on right and wrong. You didn't choose any of it, yet it defines the context in which your moral choices are made. What moral luck reveals is a tension at the very heart of how we think about ethics. On one hand, we want to believe in accountability, that people are responsible for their actions, that praise and blame are fair, that choices matter. On the other hand, we see over and over again how much of life is outside our control, how often the difference between success and failure, heroism and disaster, is nothing more than luck. Think about your own life. Think of a time when something almost went terribly wrong, but didn't. Or when something went wrong despite your best efforts. Do you deserve blame or praise for how those moments turned out? Did you really have control? In the legal system, this dilemma shows up all the time. Two people commit the same crime, but only one gets caught. Two people drive recklessly. Only one causes an accident. Even though their choices were the same, we treat them differently. One gets a fine, the other goes to prison. Is that justice, or is it just luck? Philosophers disagree on what to do with moral luck. Some argue we should only judge people by their intentions and choices, the things within their control. Anything else, they say, isn't truly moral responsibility. Others say that morality is about the real world, and that consequences matter, even if they're out of our hands. Imagine you're standing at the entrance of an impossibly large museum. This museum stretches endlessly in every direction, not metaphorically, but truly infinite. Its halls are filled with rooms, and each room contains a unique exhibit. Some rooms contain works of breathtaking beauty, others bizarre mechanical contraptions, some filled with strange smells, colors you've never seen, sounds that don't even register properly in your ears. Every room holds something different, some of it delightful, some disturbing, some incomprehensible. The question is simple. You are allowed to explore this museum for a limited amount of time, say, a single human lifetime. You can choose to spend your time however you like. You can run through as many rooms as possible, catching only a glimpse of each one before moving on. Or you can sit quietly in a single room, perhaps one that resonates deeply with you, and spend your entire life trying to understand it. Or perhaps a middle path, a few hours here, a few days there, sampling, but occasionally staying longer. Now, ask yourself, what is the best way to spend your time? Should you pursue novelty or depth? Is 1,000 shallow experiences more valuable than one deep connection? Is beauty more important than understanding? And what if the room you pick first shapes what you think is worth seeing next? If the museum is truly infinite, then no matter what you choose, you will miss infinitely more than you experience. This realization can be paralyzing, the sheer scale of what you'll never see. So, then, what is the right strategy? Is there even such a thing as a right strategy? Do you follow a map or wander freely? Do you seek meaning or let meaning find you? Maybe the museum itself doesn't care. It simply exists. It was never meant to be fully known. Maybe you're not even the first visitor. Maybe there are others, lost in other wings, rooms you'll never reach. Maybe the museum is conscious. Maybe you are one of its exhibits. Now imagine this museum isn't just a metaphor for life. Maybe it's your own mind, or the internet, or the sum total of human culture, or the universe itself, and you, a tiny observer, passing through. What you do in this museum says something about who you are, not just what you value, but how you confront the ungraspable. Do you despair over what you can't see, or celebrate what you can? Maybe there's no perfect approach. just the one you choose, and the grace with which you carry that choice. In the end, you leave the museum the way you came in, alone, uncertain, and overwhelmed. But maybe, just maybe, you carry something with you, a memory, a sensation, a story. And maybe that was the point all along. Imagine a person who doesn't speak a word of Chinese sitting alone in a locked room. Inside the room, they have a huge instruction manual, written in English, that tells them exactly how to manipulate Chinese symbols. If a certain character comes in, they're told to respond with another, following strict syntactic rules. People outside the room slide in notes written in Chinese, and based on the rulebook, the person inside slides back perfectly appropriate Chinese responses. To those outside, it looks like they're having a conversation with someone who understands Chinese. But the person in the room doesn't understand a single word. They're just manipulating symbols based on instructions. There's no awareness, no comprehension, no meaning. It's all mechanical. This is the Chinese room. John Searle introduced it in 1980 to challenge the idea that a computer running the right program could be said to understand language in the way humans do. According to him, computers, like the person in the room, manipulate symbols without any grasp of their meaning. They process syntax, not semantics. No matter how intelligent a system seems from the outside, Searle argued that it's not truly conscious, not really thinking, not actually understanding. It's just following instructions. This thought experiment sparked massive debate in philosophy of mind, cognitive science, and artificial intelligence. Some say the room as a whole, person plus rulebook plus system, is what understands Chinese. Others argue that understanding requires more than external behavior. It needs awareness, intentionality, maybe even subjective experience. The Chinese room forces us to ask, can a machine ever really know something? Or are we just impressed by an illusion of intelligence? And more hauntingly, if a system could respond so perfectly that we couldn't tell it apart from a human, would it even matter? Would we believe it understands simply because it acts like it does? Infinite regress is the idea that every explanation, reason, or justification requires a further explanation, which then itself requires another explanation, and so on endlessly. Imagine asking a child why something is the way it is, and they reply, because it is. Unsatisfied, you press further, but why? And they answer again, because of something else. You keep asking why, and each time, the answer refers to something else, which in turn refers to something else. It never ends. This is the basic shape of infinite regress. At first, this seems like just a quirk of annoying conversations or philosophy class hypotheticals, but it actually gets at something much deeper. It challenges our very ability to ground knowledge, meaning, and existence itself. If every belief or claim must be justified by another belief or claim, then either we eventually loop around, we find some foundational stopping point, or we fall into a bottomless pit of explanations forever. Infinite regress isn't just an abstract puzzle. It shows up in logic, metaphysics, ethics, science, epistemology, theology, and even everyday reasoning. Take morality, for example. Why is it wrong to lie? You might say, because it hurts people. Why is hurting people wrong? Because people deserve to be treated with respect. Why do they deserve respect? Because they have intrinsic value. Why do they have intrinsic value? And so on. Each answer demands another justification. Eventually, you either arrive at a foundational belief, something you take as self-evident, or you keep going. But if you keep going, how can you ever claim to really know anything? In metaphysics, the infinite regress problem often arises when trying to explain existence itself. Why does the universe exist? Some might say it was caused by a Big Bang. But what caused the Big Bang? Maybe a quantum fluctuation. What caused that? Each cause points to a prior cause. This chain might go back forever, an infinite regress of causes. Or it might stop at some uncaused cause, like a prime mover, a necessary being, or a brute fact. But what if there is no final explanation? What if there's no ultimate cause, no bedrock truth? What if the structure of reality is just an endless ladder with no bottom rung? This is where things get dizzying. It feels like something must ground the chain, that there must be a stopping point. Otherwise, how can anything ever truly begin? Some philosophers try to stop the regress with foundationalism, the view that some beliefs are self-justifying or axiomatic. These beliefs don't require further support. They're like the ground floor of knowledge. But even then we can ask, why that axiom? Why accept it and not some other? If the answer is just because, does that really satisfy us? Others propose coherentism, the idea that beliefs support each other in a web, not a chain. So, instead of one belief depending on another and another in a straight line, beliefs interlock in a kind of mutual support system. But then we face the issue of circularity. If belief A justifies belief B and belief B justifies A, is that enough? Or is that just an elegant way of walking in a circle? Infinite regress also appears in our sense of self. What makes you you? Is it your memories? Okay, but what connects the memory of your 10-year-old self to the person you are now? Is it continuity of experience? Then what connects each moment of experience? Is there some unchanging soul or self underneath it all? But if so, what defines that self? What justifies it? What underpins that? We end up asking, what is the thing that makes the thing what it is? Forever. This shows up in theology too. If God created everything, who created God? Some say God is uncaused, a necessary being, existing by nature of its own essence. But why should that be possible for God and not for the universe itself? If we accept an uncaused God to stop the regress, why not accept an uncaused universe, or multiple universes, or an eternal loop of creation? The regress pushes us to ask, why this and not something else? Why anything at all? Infinite regress even haunts the act of questioning itself. Every answer leads to another question. The mind seems structured to never be fully satisfied. This is both a gift and a curse. It's the source of philosophy, science, and exploration, but also the reason we may never find final answers. It's as if we're in an endless game of asking, pulling threads that always lead to more threads, with no final knot to untangle. Some embrace this. They see infinite regress not as a problem, but as a feature of reality, a way of showing that the universe is more like a process than a thing, a flow without a fixed origin. Others find it deeply unsettling. If nothing can ever be finally explained, then what's the point of asking? The problem of induction is one of the most quietly unsettling questions in all of philosophy. At first glance, it seems almost trivial, even boring, but the more you think about it, the more it unravels everything you assume about the world. It starts with something so simple. The sun rose yesterday. It rose the day before that, and the day before that. Every morning you've been alive, the sun has risen. So naturally you assume it will rise tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. This habit of expecting the future to resemble the past is so deeply wired into our brains that we barely even notice it. It's how we navigate the world. It's why we put on sunscreen, or wait for the traffic light to change, or save money for retirement. But David Hume, the 18th century philosopher who gave this problem its clearest form, asked a deceptively simple question. What justifies that assumption? Why do we believe that the future will resemble the past? Why do we believe that patterns will continue? It seems obvious. Of course they will. But that answer, Hume points out, is circular. We believe that patterns continue because they have continued. But that's just using past experience to justify the assumption that past experience is a reliable guide. If someone asked you, why do you believe the sun will rise tomorrow? You might say, because it always has. But that's not a logical guarantee. That's not a law of the universe. That's an expectation. It's a habit of thought. And habits, as comforting as they may be, are not the same as certainty. Induction is the process of reasoning from specific instances to general rules. You see 1,000 white swans, and you infer that all swans are white. But then someone finds a black swan in Australia, and your generalization collapses. One counterexample is all it takes. The problem is that induction doesn't guarantee truth. It's not deductively valid. The conclusion might turn out to be false, even if all the premises are true. But here's the real kicker. Almost everything we believe about the world relies on induction. Science relies on induction. Statistics, medicine, cooking, relationships. If you couldn't rely on past patterns to guide future behavior, you couldn't function. You couldn't drive a car because you couldn't be sure the brakes would work the same way they did yesterday. You couldn't eat your favorite food because you couldn't assume it would taste the same. You couldn't trust gravity. You couldn't even trust your own memory. So, we're trapped. On the one hand, we need induction. It's built into the very structure of thought, but on the other hand, we can't justify it. There's no non-circular way to prove that the future will resemble the past. And Hume wasn't offering a solution. He was just pointing out the cliff edge beneath our feet. The thing we take most for granted, regularity, stability, the reliability of experience, isn't grounded in anything provable. Now, you might say, well, it works. Induction works. Science makes predictions, and those predictions come true. Doesn't that count for something? But again, that's using past success to justify future reliance. It's still induction. It still doesn't solve the core problem. Why should success in the past guarantee success in the future? Why should a pattern hold just because it is held so far? Imagine a turkey. Every day the farmer feeds it. The turkey starts to think, this is the way of the world. I am fed every day. I will continue to be fed. And then comes Thanksgiving. That's the problem of induction. You secretly control the entire world. No one knows. You look like a regular person. You go to work, come home, live a normal life. But behind the scenes, every government, financial system, media outlet, and major institution ultimately bends to your will. With a word, you could start or end wars. With a click, you could crash economies or create utopias. Every major decision is routed through you, and you're always obeyed, though the world never sees your hand. And yet, you don't act, or at least not very often. Maybe you tweak things here and there, avert a disaster, boost a struggling country, or stop a tyrant before they rise. But overall, you let the world play out on its own. You watch as people struggle, suffer, succeed, and love. You witness injustice and tragedy. You hear people cry out for change. You see hope, and you see despair. The question is, are you doing the right thing? Would it be better to rule openly, to use your power to shape a better world, knowing that your vision might not be everyone's? Or is restraint the higher virtue, letting humanity find its own way, even if that means enduring pain and injustice you could prevent? And what does it mean for morality when you could fix everything but choose not to? Maybe you've convinced yourself that intervening too much would remove people's agency. Maybe you believe suffering has purpose, or that the arc of history bends on its own. Maybe you're afraid that with each well-intentioned change, you'll cause 1,000 unintended harms. Or maybe you simply feel the crushing weight of possibility. When you can do anything, how do you choose something? But then, imagine this. You walk past a hungry child on the street. You could give them food, a home, a future. In an instant, no effort. But you don't. You keep walking. Because you think the system will correct itself. Or because you don't want to break your rule of non-intervention. Or because you're just tired. Does that make you a monster or a sage? Now reverse it. What if someone else held that power, and they were watching you, letting you suffer while they remained invisible? Would that change your answer? Imagine a world where you could transfer years from your life to someone else, or receive extra years from another person willing to give them up. It's called the lifespan swap. The technology is perfectly safe. No risk, no side effects, just a direct transfer of time. You give 10 years of your life, you live 10 fewer years. Someone else lives 10 more. Now, picture two people, an old scientist who needs just 5 more years to complete a theory that could solve the global energy crisis, and a young, healthy 25-year-old with a full life ahead. The old scientist applies for a lifespan extension. The 25-year-old sees the application and offers 10 of their years, enough for the scientist to finish his work and maybe even enjoy retirement. But here's the twist. The scientist might not succeed. The theory could fail. The young person will definitely lose those years, though. Time they'll never get back. They might die at 78 instead of 88, or 60 instead of 70. Time they didn't feel at the moment of giving, but that will one day just be missing. Is it moral to give away your time if you don't yet know what it's worth to you? Is it selfish not to help if you believe your time might not be as valuable as someone else's? Would your answer change if the recipient were a family member, a child with cancer, a convicted criminal who turned their life around? And what about the market? What if lifespan became currency? The wealthy could buy years from the poor. time would become a commodity, and people in desperate situations might sell decades just to survive in the present. You could argue it's their choice, but is a choice made in desperation really free? Then there's this. If someone gave you 10 years of their life, just handed them over, how would you live those years? Would you feel obligated to do something great? Would you squander them? Could you even enjoy them, knowing someone else paid for that time? Now flip it again. What if you're old and dying, and a stranger gives you 10 years? You didn't ask, but they insisted. Do you take it? The lifespan swap doesn't just test how we value our time. It forces us to ask how we value each other's. Imagine waking up one day and discovering that every other person on Earth has vanished without a trace. There's no explanation, no war, no disaster, no warning, just silence. You are the only one left. Cities still hum with energy. Lights flicker on. The infrastructure remains intact for now. Food is plentiful. There are no threats. But there is also no one to talk to, no one to see, no one to recognize what you do or fail to do. The entire world has become your private stage, and the curtains will never rise. In this one-person society, you face questions that society has always answered for you. Are laws still meaningful when there's no one left to enforce them or be protected by them? Does morality still apply when there's no one to harm, no one to help, no consequences beyond your own conscience? You could walk into any building you want, take any painting from any museum, drive any car, sleep in any palace. You could light a bonfire in the middle of the Louvre, and no one would stop you. But would you? Would you still recycle? Would you still try to preserve the world's beauty? Would you take care of your health, follow routines, wake up on time? Would you create art or music, even though no one would ever hear it? You're now the only audience for your own actions, and perhaps the only judge. That changes things. Consider this. Is morality still relevant when there are no others? Or is morality by nature a social contract, a tool designed only for life among people? If you no longer have duties to others, what do you have duties to? The planet? The memory of humanity? A god? Yourself? This scenario forces us to reflect on where our values truly come from. Do we act the way we do because others are watching? Because laws demand it? Because society expects it? Or because we believe in our bones that certain things are right even when no one else is around? It also challenges our understanding of identity. If no one else exists to remember who you are, does your identity still have meaning? If you help no one, build nothing, and leave no trace, does your life still matter? The one-person society strips away every external motivator. All that remains is your inner compass. The question is, will it still point anywhere? Imagine a future where technology has extended human life to thousands of years. Aging has been eliminated, disease is mostly under control, and barring accidents, people can live indefinitely. But there's a catch. While the body remains young and functional, the human brain still has limited capacity for memory. Once it reaches a certain threshold, new memories begin to overwrite old ones. This isn't selective or voluntary. When new experiences come in, older ones are pushed out, forgotten completely, with no way to retrieve them. At first, this seems manageable. People begin to curate their memories, keeping journals or external backups to remind themselves of important events. But over centuries, the process becomes more drastic. Childhood memories are the first to go. Then, early relationships. Eventually, even your sense of who you once were begins to dissolve. You may meet someone and be told you were once in love with them, or that you started a revolution or committed a terrible crime, things you no longer remember and cannot emotionally connect to. The question becomes, who are you after forgetting everything that made you who you were? Is identity preserved simply by the continuation of consciousness, even if nothing of the original person remains in memory? Or do those memories define the self so completely that losing them means becoming a new person altogether? If your entire personality, preferences, and relationships have changed, but the body and neural continuity remain, are you still you? Now take it a step further. Imagine a society where this kind of identity loss becomes routine. People schedule memory purges every few centuries to refresh their minds and remain productive. Some even see it as liberating, the chance to reinvent themselves endlessly. Others see it as a quiet form of death, where the person who once existed has vanished, even if their body and brain remain intact. Would you want to live in a world like that? Would it still be you doing the living, or would you at some point simply become a stranger to your own story, an endless series of people wearing the same body, one after another, never knowing the ones who came before? Imagine a spacecraft traveling to a distant, Earth-like planet, a journey that will take 500 years. On board are no adults, no caretakers, only infants. These babies are grown in artificial wombs, nurtured by machines, raised by AI, and educated by a carefully programmed system. The goal? To establish a human colony on a distant world. The people who designed the mission, scientists, ethicists, engineers, are all long dead. The babies will never know them, never speak to them, never return. These children are orphans, not of parents, but of a planet. Earth was their origin, but it is no longer their home. By the time they're old enough to understand where they came from, Earth may be a myth, a ghost, a faded signal in the sky. The thought experiment is simple. Is it ethical to send children into the void, alone, for the sake of humanity's future? No child consented to this mission. No person aboard the ship chose to be there. They were created for a purpose, colonization, without knowledge or permission. Is that a violation of their autonomy? Or is it just another version of what already happens on Earth? Being born into a world you didn't choose, shaped by forces you never asked for. Supporters of the mission might say it's noble, that humanity must continue, and that this is our best shot, that the orphans will grow up with purpose, community, and a world to call their own, that the AI raising them will be compassionate, wise, and stable. But those are hopes, not guarantees. What if the AI malfunctions? What if the social systems break down? What if loneliness becomes their dominant emotion, living as the only conscious beings in a silent universe? Some argue that these children are being treated as means to an end, tools for survival, rather than individuals with their own rights. Others argue that all parenting is like this to some degree. Children don't ask to be born, but they're brought into life by the decisions of others, often for reasons beyond their understanding. But this case is different. The interstellar orphans don't get the warmth of human touch, the chaos of culture, or the messiness of family. They grow up in an artificial paradise, designed entirely by people who never lived to see its results. It's a thought experiment about ethics, about future responsibility, and about what we owe to those who don't yet exist, and may never have the power to speak for themselves. If success means the continuation of our species, is that enough to justify creating a generation born without a home? Or is the very act of creating life, without the ability to nurture it directly, an unpayable moral debt? Imagine you're standing in your kitchen. You see a red apple on the counter. You reach out, grab it, feel its smooth skin, and take a bite. Instantly, you taste the sweetness, smell the fruity scent, and hear the crunch. All of these sensations, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, are processed in different parts of your brain, and yet somehow they're all experienced together as part of one unified moment, the experience of biting into an apple. This is the binding problem. At its core, the binding problem asks, how does the brain manage to integrate all these separate pieces of information into a single, coherent experience? Your brain processes color in one region, shape in another, motion in yet another. Sound and taste are handled elsewhere. But you don't experience these things as disconnected data points. You experience a whole, a single apple, crisp and red and juicy, held in your hand and understood effortlessly. To understand why this is a problem, consider how your brain is structured. It's a massive collection of specialized areas, each doing its own job. Neurons fire in complex patterns across different regions, many of which are physically distant from each other. There's no known central place in the brain where all this information is stitched together like a movie editor compiling footage. And yet, what we perceive seems seamless. We don't just see shapes and colors. We see a red apple. We don't just hear frequencies and vibrations. We hear a song, a voice, a dog barking. These are not data streams. They're experiences. Now, imagine watching a movie where the sound is slightly out of sync with the video. You notice it immediately. The illusion of unity breaks down. That tiny discrepancy highlights how fragile integration really is. In your brain, the timing has to be just right. Not only do all the parts of your brain need to process different sensory inputs, they need to do so in a way that feels instantaneous and cohesive. One proposed solution is that there are neural oscillations, rhythmic patterns of activity, that help keep all these processes in sync. Think of it like a conductor keeping a symphony together. But no one really knows if that's the whole answer. And some scientists argue that the problem may not even have a single answer. There might be different types of binding for different kinds of experiences. But it gets even weirder. Let's say you see a red circle and a blue square. Then, for just a moment, your brain misfires and switches the colors. So you think you saw a blue circle and a red square. That kind of error actually happens in perception experiments. Your brain knows what colors and shapes are, but sometimes it binds them incorrectly. This shows that the brain doesn't just passively receive data. It actively assembles it, and sometimes it gets it wrong. This raises deeper questions. Is consciousness itself nothing more than a series of these binding events? Is the self just the ultimate binding of all experiences across time? If your memories, sensations, and thoughts are all processed in separate parts of your brain, what creates the illusion of a continuous, unified you? Some philosophers argue that there is no binding problem at all, that the very idea of unity is just a trick of language, or a bias of how we think. Maybe consciousness is not unified. Maybe it's a fragmented, chaotic system that only feels coherent because we're inside of it. Imagine a future where artificial intelligence has advanced to the point where it can perfectly replicate a person's voice, mannerisms, memories, and personality, everything that made them. Now, imagine that after a loved one passes away, you have the option to interact with a digital reconstruction of them, an AI grief bot. It remembers your inside jokes. It finishes your sentences. It tells you the story of how you first met. It even responds with the same warmth, frustration, or humor that your loved one would have expressed in life. At first, this might feel like a gift, something that eases the unbearable weight of loss. You could talk to your mother again, hear her comfort you when you're struggling, or speak to a partner who passed away too young, get their opinion on something happening in your life, or just sit in comfortable silence, listening to them breathe. But very quickly, this raises deep, unsettling questions. Are you healing, or are you avoiding the pain of loss altogether? Is the bot truly helping you grieve, or is it making it impossible for you to move on? The AI may be a convincing replica, but it's not conscious. It doesn't miss you. It doesn't love you. It doesn't know it was ever based on someone who's gone. But you might start to love it. You might even begin to prefer it, because it never argues. It never gets sick. It always has time for you. And if that happens, if the bot becomes more comforting than the real person ever was, are you honoring their memory or replacing it? Worse, what if future AI is trained not just on the person you lost, but on idealized versions of them? Smoothed over, flawed memories corrected, arguments erased. You're no longer talking to who they were, but who you wish they had been. This creates a new kind of loneliness, not the absence of the person, but the presence of a perfect version that was never real. And one day, you might find yourself faced with a decision. Do you shut the bot off and say goodbye again, knowing this time it's forever? Or do you keep it running, quietly accepting that you've traded grief for an illusion? In a world of artificial comfort, does the rawness of real loss still serve a purpose? Or will the future offer us escape routes so compelling that we never quite finish saying goodbye? Imagine you're walking through a vast desert and stumble upon a perfectly working watch. Its gears are precise, ticking in harmony. You wouldn't think the sand randomly shaped itself into a timepiece. You'd assume someone made it, or at least that there was some kind of process that led to its formation. Now replace the watch with the entire universe: stars, planets, laws of physics, consciousness. The anthropic principle, particularly in its strong form, asks us to consider this very idea. The universe appears fine-tuned for the existence of observers, like you and me, because if it weren't, we wouldn't be here to notice it. But the strong version of this principle doesn't just stop at "we're here, so the universe must allow life." It flips the whole thing on its head and says that the universe must have properties that allow life to emerge. In other words, conscious beings like us are not just possible in this universe. We are somehow necessary. The conditions of the cosmos aren't just friendly to life by chance. They're either built to ensure life arises or they are inseparable from the fact that life, intelligent observers, exist. Why does the speed of light have the value it does? Why does gravity hold things together just so, but not too tightly? Why is the strength of the strong nuclear force perfectly tuned to allow atoms to form without collapsing in on themselves or flying apart? These constants seem bizarrely specific. If even one of them were slightly different, the universe could have been sterile, lifeless, dark, or short-lived. The strong anthropic principle has been taken in different directions. One version says, out of all possible universes, we exist in the one capable of supporting life because life had to emerge somewhere, and this one just happens to be the one we're in. That sounds a lot like luck, or like we're in one of many universes, a multiverse. But another interpretation goes further and suggests that the universe is compelled, in some sense, to give rise to observers. It's not that the universe allows for people like you and me, it requires us. Now we're crossing into deeply metaphysical territory. What does it mean for a universe to require observers? Is consciousness fundamental to reality? Some physicists and philosophers have speculated that consciousness might not be a latecomer to the universe, arising only after matter organizes itself into brains, but instead a central part of the universe's structure, perhaps even the reason the universe exists in the form that it does. Others tie this idea to quantum mechanics, particularly the notion that observation affects the outcome of certain physical events. If the act of measurement can alter the state of a system, does that imply the universe needs observers to collapse its possibilities into a specific reality? If so, then consciousness might not be a cosmic accident. It could be the thing that gives the cosmos form. But not everyone buys this. Critics of the strong anthropic principle say it's circular. Of course the universe allows for life. We're here talking about it. That doesn't mean it was designed or destined for us. Maybe countless lifeless universes exist, and we just happen to be in the one where things worked out. Or maybe the universe isn't fine-tuned at all. Maybe life is just incredibly adaptable and found a way to arise in a place that's barely good enough for it. Still, the idea lingers. Maybe it's not just that we live in the universe. Maybe the universe lives in us. Maybe it needs us to witness it, to understand it, to complete it in some strange, unknowable way. That's the unsettling, awe-inspiring, and strangely comforting suggestion at the heart of the strong anthropic principle, that consciousness isn't an afterthought of the universe. It's the reason there's a universe at all. Imagine you're holding a red apple. You look at it and instantly recognize that it's red. Now, think about another red object, say, a fire truck or a stop sign. Even though they're different things, your mind tells you they share the same redness. But what is that quality exactly? Does redness exist in the world, or is it just something in our minds? This is where Platonism and nominalism come in. There are two fundamentally different ways of explaining what it means for multiple things to share a common feature, whether that's a color, a shape, a number, or even a moral principle. Platonism, named after the philosopher Plato, says that abstract entities, things like numbers, colors, justice, or triangularity, exist independently of the physical world. In this view, redness isn't just a label we slap onto objects. It's a real thing, an abstract, perfect form. And when we see something red, we're recognizing that it participates in the form of redness. These forms, according to Platonism, don't exist in space and time. You can't touch them, but they're more than just thoughts. They're real, eternal, and unchanging. Plato used the metaphor of a perfect world of forms to explain this. Imagine a realm beyond the physical, where perfect circles, ideal beauty, and true justice reside. Every circle you draw is just an imperfect copy of the perfect circle. Every act of kindness is just a shadow of true goodness. In this sense, Platonism says we discover abstract things. We don't invent them. We don't make up the number 7 or the Pythagorean theorem. We stumble upon them like explorers finding something that's always been there. Now enter nominalism. Nominalists reject this whole idea of a separate realm of abstract entities. They say that only particular individual things exist: the apple, the truck, the sign. When we say they're all red, we're just using a convenient label. Redness doesn't exist on its own. It's just a word we use to group similar experiences. In this view, there's no need for a mystical realm of forms. All we have are names, hence the term nominalism, from the Latin nomen, meaning name. To a nominalist, when you say all triangles share triangularity, you're not pointing to some universal form called triangularity floating in some abstract dimension. You're just observing that a bunch of specific shapes all happen to have three sides, and it's useful to group them together and give them a name. This debate isn't just theoretical. It underpins the foundations of mathematics, science, ethics, and even language. Take mathematics, for example. Are numbers discovered or invented? If you're a Platonist, numbers are eternal truths waiting to be found. 2 plus 2 equals 4, whether or not any humans are around to write it down. If you're a nominalist, math is a human-made system, a useful fiction we've created to make sense of patterns and relationships. Or, take morality. A Platonist might say that justice exists independently of humans. It's a timeless truth, and our job is to understand it. A nominalist might say that justice is a social construct. It's real only because we agree it is, and it could have been different if our cultures had evolved differently. One of the most interesting aspects of this debate is how deeply it affects how we perceive reality. If Platonism is true, then reality includes an invisible layer of truth, a hidden scaffolding of perfect forms that we can only access through reason or intuition. But if nominalism is true, then the world is just the messy, particular stuff we see around us, and any deeper patterns we think we see are just projections of our own minds. There's also a third position worth mentioning, conceptualism, which says that abstract entities exist, but only in minds. Not in some magical Platonic realm, and not as mere names either. They exist mentally, as concepts we can share, but not as physical or independent things. Conceptualism tries to split the difference. Abstract concepts are real, but only because conscious beings think them. So, where does this leave us? If you feel like beauty, truth, and mathematics are too elegant to be mere coincidences, you might lean toward Platonism. But if you're skeptical of invisible realms and prefer to stick with what can be observed, you might favor nominalism. And maybe that's the deeper value of the thought experiment. It doesn't just ask you what you believe. It asks what kind of world you think you live in. One filled with timeless, objective truths waiting to be uncovered, or one shaped entirely by human thought, culture, and convenience. Either way, the next time you see something red, or beautiful, or just, you might wonder, is this quality real, or is it just a name we've agreed on? And is there a perfect version of it somewhere, just beyond what we can see? Imagine a future where technology allows multiple human minds to be linked together, not just for communication, but to fully share thoughts, memories, and sensations. You no longer speak or write to communicate. Instead, ideas move directly between brains like data in a network. With this, a new kind of existence becomes possible, a hive mind, where individuality dissolves into a collective consciousness. In this shared mind, there is no more misunderstanding, no secrets, no lies. Every thought, intention, and memory is instantly accessible to everyone else in the group. The boundaries of the self begin to blur. You can remember someone else's childhood as vividly as your own. Feel their joy, their grief, their love. As the link deepens, the distinction between me and you starts to vanish. But this leads to profound questions. If you merge your mind with others, do you cease to be an individual? Are you still you? Or are you now a new entity, a fusion of consciousnesses forming something entirely different from any of its parts? What happens to privacy when every part of you is shared? Could trust and empathy finally reach their highest form in this collective experience? Or would the loss of personal boundaries create a new kind of suffering, an inability to turn inward, to be alone, to breathe? Would this kind of unity create a utopia, a world without war, greed, or loneliness, because everyone truly understands each other? Or would it erase the very things that make us human, the sense of self, the inner world, the silence? And if hive minds become normal, would those who choose to remain alone be seen as selfish, rebellious? Or would they be the last protectors of individuality in a hyper-connected world? Could there be beauty in a mind with boundaries, in a self that is separate, mysterious, and incomplete? And most importantly, if you had the chance to merge minds with others, to feel what they feel, know what they know, and become part of something greater, would you say yes? Or would you choose to remain just you? Imagine you're going into surgery. The doctors need your permission to perform a potentially life-saving procedure. You sign the forms, agree to the risks, and go under anesthesia. While you're unconscious, the situation changes. A new experimental treatment becomes available, a treatment with a much higher success rate. The doctors are confident it's your best chance, but you're asleep. You can't say yes or no. They choose to go ahead with it, believing it's what you'd want. You wake up to discover they did something entirely different than what you originally consented to. Was that okay? Now push it further. What if, before going under, you gave advance permission for the doctors to do whatever they believed was best while you were asleep, even if it contradicted your original instructions? Does that make their choice more ethical? Or does your inability to revoke consent once unconscious make the whole agreement questionable? Let's shift contexts. Imagine a person gives advance consent to their partner to make certain decisions on their behalf while they're in a coma. Months go by, situations evolve, medical options change, feelings change, maybe even love fades. Does that early consent still hold power? Is consent something that only matters in the moment? Or can we give it for a moment we'll never be awake for? Now, apply it to law. What if a citizen gives prior consent to surveillance while they sleep, agreeing that their devices can record their thoughts, movements, or dreams for national security? Is that really consent, or just a fiction we create to give comfort to power? And what about moral responsibility? If someone agrees to do something unconsciously, like driving while hypnotized, or agreeing to be used as a vessel for another's actions while asleep, who holds the responsibility for what happens? The deeper this thought experiment goes, the more it challenges the very idea of autonomy. Can someone meaningfully consent to an experience they won't remember, can't interrupt, and might not have predicted? If you're unconscious, are you still the same person as the one who gave consent? And finally, in an age of neural implants and brain-machine interfaces, what happens when consent becomes programmable? What happens when our waking selves become mere advisors to our sleeping minds? The sleeper's consent asks us to examine not just what we agree to, but when that agreement truly matters. Terraforming ethics. Imagine we discover a distant planet with alien microbes, primitive life that's existed for millions of years. To make the planet habitable for humans, we'd need to terraform it, change the atmosphere, introduce Earth species, and reshape the surface. In doing so, we'd wipe out the native life. Is that ethical? Some argue we'd be improving the planet, bringing complexity and beauty. Others say it's cosmic arrogance, assuming our form of life is superior, even when the native organisms were there first. And what about lifeless planets? Should we transform them just because we can? Do barren worlds have value simply in their untouched state? Terraforming isn't just a scientific decision, it's a moral one. Do we spread life, or respect what's already there, even if it's strange, silent, and ancient? Imagine that everything you've ever done, every action, every thought, every moment you believed you were alone, was recorded, not by surveillance, not by technology, but by something more abstract, more permanent. Imagine that. Far into the future, perhaps thousands of years from now, a society exists that can access the complete history of humanity. They have full, unfiltered knowledge of every life that's ever been lived. They can see your life, not through hearsay or fragmentary documents, but in perfect detail, as if they were watching it unfold in real time. This future society is deeply ethical, far beyond our current understanding. Their moral reasoning is advanced. They're able to discern intent, context, nuance. They understand what pressures you were under, what information you had, what fears you carried. They don't judge in the way we do now. They're wiser, slower, and more reflective. You are one of billions of people from the past whose life is being studied. Not by choice. You didn't ask for this. But it doesn't matter. The eternal jury has access to your life. They're not interested in punishment. They don't believe in hell or vengeance. What they want is understanding. They seek to know. What kind of person were you when no one was looking? What decisions did you make, not for praise or recognition, but when you thought no one would ever know? They consider your life as a whole, not just the big decisions, but the small ones. The way you treated people with less power, the kindnesses you gave that no one remembered, the cruelty you justified because it was convenient. The truths you spoke when lying would have been easier. The lies you told to protect yourself. They look at these things not to categorize you, but to try to see the shape of your soul, if you had one. Now imagine you knew about them all along. From the beginning of your life, you were told, one day, far into the future, an unimaginably wise and compassionate society will watch every moment of your life. They won't just see what you did. They'll understand why. They'll know your doubts, your temptations, your regrets. They will not hate you, but they will see you. Would that change how you lived? Would you be more honest, knowing that your excuses would someday be transparent? Would you be more forgiving, knowing that your own moments of weakness would be examined with care? Would you be more courageous, knowing that someone in the far future would see the strength it took to do the right thing, even when no one else did? This thought experiment isn't about guilt. It's about accountability without punishment, recognition without applause. It's about what kind of person you'd choose to be if you knew your life would one day be understood completely, by minds so far beyond us, we can barely imagine their wisdom. The eternal jury doesn't exist to shame you. It exists to ask you a question. If someone truly knew you, completely, what kind of story would they see? And knowing that, what kind of story would you choose to write? Retrocausality is the idea that the future can affect the past. It runs directly against our everyday experience of time, where causes always seem to precede their effects. You drop a glass, and then it shatters. You light a match, and then it burns. But what if, in some deep and fundamental way, an event in the future could reach backward and influence what happens before it? This concept is not just a philosophical fantasy. It has roots in interpretations of quantum physics, where strange things seem to happen when particles are observed. In some experiments, decisions made in the present appear to affect the outcomes of events that were seemingly already determined in the past. The famous delayed choice quantum eraser experiment is one example. In this setup, a photon can behave either like a particle or a wave depending on how it's measured. But the twist is that the decision about how to measure it can be made after it has already entered the experiment, and yet it somehow knows how it should behave, as if the future measurement reached back in time and altered its behavior. This seems impossible. How can something in the future rewrite the past? It challenges the very structure of cause and effect. But quantum physics doesn't operate by the rules of common sense. Some physicists propose that time may not be as linear or one-directional as we think. Instead, the past and future might exist in a kind of flexible web, influencing each other in ways we're only beginning to understand. Retrocausality also plays with the idea of free will. If a decision you haven't yet made can affect something that has already happened, does that mean the future is already determined? Or does it mean that causality isn't bound to flow in a single direction? It forces us to rethink time not as a line, but as something more like a landscape, where the path you take can loop back, cross over, and influence terrain you've already passed. From a storytelling perspective, retrocausality is a goldmine. It appears in time travel narratives, in loops where an action taken in the future alters the events that made it possible in the first place. A message from tomorrow stops a disaster today. A person saved from a crash ends up being the one who prevented it from ever occurring. But when we consider these ideas beyond fiction, they push us into a deeper confrontation with what it means to exist in time. If retrocausality is real, it suggests we may need to revise our most basic assumptions about reality. What if every decision you make now isn't just shaping your future, but is being shaped by it? What if somewhere ahead in time, a version of you is sending signals backward, nudging you toward one path or another? We don't yet know whether retrocausality is a true feature of the universe, or just an artifact of strange experiments and human interpretation. But even entertaining the possibility opens up new ways of thinking about time, choice, and the flow of reality itself. And in that unsettling ambiguity, where cause and effect might dance in both directions, we find one of the most quietly profound thought experiments imaginable. Eternalism is a view in the philosophy of time, which holds that the past, present, and future all equally exist. In contrast to presentism, the idea that only the present moment is real, eternalism treats time as a dimension much like space, where all points in time are equally real, regardless of whether they're in the past, present, or future. According to eternalism, Abraham Lincoln's assassination, the fall of Rome, your first kiss, and your great-grandchildren's lives are all just as real as this very moment, though they are located at different temporal coordinates. Imagine walking through a museum. Each exhibit is a moment in time. As a visitor, you're currently standing in front of one particular exhibit, the present. But all the other exhibits, the past and the future, are still there, existing in other rooms. You're just not standing in them. That's how eternalism sees reality. You happen to experience now, but now is just one slice of the whole temporal structure. The other slices are no less real just because you're not currently experiencing them. This view has strong support from modern physics, especially the theory of relativity. According to Einstein's special relativity, simultaneity is relative. That means whether two events happen at the same time depends on your frame of reference. There's no single objective now shared by all observers. If time doesn't unfold in a universal present, then it's hard to justify why the present moment should be ontologically privileged over any other. Eternalism challenges how we think about change and causation. If the future already exists, are we truly free? If your death is as real as your birth, what does that mean for personal growth, goals, and redemption? Are we walking a fixed timeline, or merely observing it as if watching a film that's already been recorded? Some argue that eternalism strips life of meaning, reducing our agency to the illusion of movement through a static landscape. Others find comfort in the idea that beautiful moments are never truly gone, they exist forever, even if we can't revisit them. There's also an emotional tension in eternalism. On the one hand, it can be reassuring. The people we've lost still exist in the fabric of space-time, just not in our current location. On the other hand, it can be deeply unsettling to imagine our future pain or failures already existing, waiting for us to arrive at them. If every moment is equally real, what does it mean to live in the present? Does mindfulness become a kind of aesthetic choice rather than a moral or psychological imperative? Eternalism doesn't necessarily imply determinism, but the two often go hand in hand. If all moments exist, then in what sense are we choosing anything? Some thinkers argue that eternalism is compatible with a kind of block universe libertarianism, where our decisions are real but also somehow already embedded in the block. Others embrace the deterministic implications, arguing that we are simply playing out a story that has already been written, one frame at a time. One of the most famous metaphors for eternalism is the block universe model. Time is like a loaf of bread. Each slice represents a moment. The loaf exists all at once. We, with our limited consciousness, experience the loaf one slice at a time, giving us the illusion of movement. But the loaf itself, the whole of time, is static, complete, unchanging. If this metaphor is correct, then time doesn't pass at all. Instead, our minds travel through it, like a needle playing the grooves of a record. Critics of eternalism argue that it doesn't match our lived experience. We feel time flowing. We experience causality. We make decisions. We regret. We hope. We plan. Eternalism seems to flatten all of that into a kind of frozen tableau. But supporters counter that many features of experience, like the feeling that the sun goes around the earth, turn out to be illusions when we look more deeply. Ultimately, eternalism forces us to reevaluate what it means to exist. Are we temporal beings moving through a river? Or are we spatially fixed in a four-dimensional structure, our entire lives mapped out from beginning to end? If everything exists already, what role do we play in the story of the universe? Are we actors improvising a scene, or characters whose lines have already been written? And if our happiest and most painful moments are equally permanent, how should we carry that knowledge as we move, slice by slice, through the great loaf of time? Imagine a chip, tiny, invisible, and implanted in your brain, that subtly alters your decisions in real time. It doesn't control you. It doesn't override your personality. It simply nudges your moral compass just slightly. You become more generous, more patient, more compassionate. You don't even notice it happening. You're still you, but you're a better version of yourself, consistently. Now imagine this chip is free. No side effects, no privacy violations, no corporate strings attached. It's the product of a purely altruistic scientific breakthrough offered to everyone on Earth. Would you take it? Would you be willing to have your moral instincts calibrated, like how you'd calibrate a scale or a clock, so that you automatically do what's considered morally better more often? And more importantly, should this chip be mandatory? Let's say studies show that societies that adopt the chip see drops in crime, corruption, environmental harm, domestic violence, and even rudeness. People start treating each other with more respect. Empathy becomes easier, resentment fades quicker. The world gets measurably kinder. But there's a trade-off. People who take the chip often feel a faint sense of detachment from their own choices. They still feel joy, guilt, anger, but slightly dulled, slightly distant. Like their emotions have been softened at the edges. Not muted, but edited. Would that change be worth it? Would a morally improved world lose something vital in the process, like spontaneity, individuality, or the struggle that gives ethical decisions their meaning? What happens to heroism when being good becomes effortless? And what about consent? If one nation mandates the chip for all citizens, can others resist the pressure to do the same? Can a truly free society allow its members to opt out of being better? Or is that like opting out of being vaccinated during a pandemic? If we could engineer ourselves to be kinder, more just, more selfless, and chose not to, what does that say about us? Maybe morality has always been part instinct, part effort. Maybe the struggle itself is essential, or maybe that's just an outdated myth. And it's time to accept that being better doesn't have to be hard. The moral autopilot waits. Would you let it steer? Imagine a future where consciousness is fully digitized and transferable. In this world, a new industry emerges, mind leasing. Just like you might lease a car or rent out your home, now people can lease out their own consciousness, their very mind, to others temporarily. For example, someone with advanced mathematical ability might lease their mind to a struggling engineering student during exam season. A famous artist could lease their creative intuition to a startup designing the visual content. A war veteran's lived experience might be leased to an actor preparing for a role. During the lease, the lessee doesn't take over the mind entirely. Instead, they gain access to key patterns of thought, memories, instincts, and emotional responses. It's like having a co-pilot inside your head, guiding your choices, coloring your perception, nudging your thoughts. At first glance, this seems beneficial. It's a new form of collaboration, empathy, and productivity. It allows access to lived experience without years of training. But now consider the implications. If someone leases their mind too frequently or for too long, does it degrade their own sense of self? Do the mental habits of others begin to linger after the lease is over? Does your mind become porous, a patchwork of foreign intuitions and decisions that feel like your own but aren't? What happens if a lessee commits a crime while partially guided by a leased mind? Is the original person partially responsible? What about consent? If someone's mind is leased while they're unconscious, or if they're financially pressured into it, is it ethical to lease someone's inner life the same way we lease material possessions? Then consider social dynamics. Would the rich and powerful begin leasing the minds of the most emotionally intelligent, empathetic, or wise individuals, enhancing their own mental performance? Would the best thinkers in society be reduced to mere mental laborers, their inner lives commodified, rented, and returned? There's also a question of identity. If you lease your mind to others regularly, do you become less you? Over time, does your original personality dissolve, overwritten by the feedback loops of others who have used your consciousness for their own ends? And what of memory? When someone leases your mind, do they gain access to your memories? If so, can they copy them? Can someone else end up knowing your childhood better than you do? This thought experiment challenges the line between the personal and the shared, the internal and the marketable. It blurs the boundaries of autonomy and intimacy. In a world where the mind can be leased like a subscription service, are we still individuals, or are we slowly becoming networks of borrowed selves? Mind leasing is not just a glimpse into a possible future, it's a mirror held up to the present. Even today, how often do we let others shape our thoughts? Through media, advertising, politics, or even the people we admire, we already rent out tiny corners of our minds. The only difference is that, in this future, the transaction is explicit. And so, you must ask yourself, If leasing your mind could help others, earn money, or unlock new kinds of connection, would you do it? Or is your mind the last thing you'd be willing to rent? Imagine you're offered a chance to undergo an intense form of therapy. You're struggling, grief, trauma, deep existential dread. Talk therapy hasn't worked. Medication only blunts the edge. Then you're offered something radical: simulation therapy. Here's how it works. You're put under physically. Your body remains safe, monitored in a clinic. Your brain is connected to a simulation that feels completely real, indistinguishable from waking life. In this simulated world, you're placed into a new environment, one designed to help you heal. Maybe you live a quiet life by a lake. Maybe you're reunited with a version of a lost loved one. Maybe you relive a painful event, but with a different outcome. Time inside the simulation is different. What feels like years might only be a few hours in the real world. You could spend a decade inside, growing, changing, processing, healing. When it's over, you're gently brought back to your physical self, with the memories of the simulation still intact. The promise is that it works. People come out of simulation therapy at peace, with clarity they could never find in the real world. But the questions it raises are heavy. If your memories in the simulation feel just as real, are they not real enough? If you loved and lost someone again in that simulated world, if you built a life there, was that experience not meaningful? Some patients resist leaving. A few ask to go back. Others forget entirely that it was a simulation at all. Would you try it? Would it matter that the people you interacted with were generated by code, not conscious? If it helped you move on, does the source of that healing matter? And if you're living in a simulated therapy world right now, how would you know? Simulation therapy forces us to question what makes life real. Is it the environment or the emotion? Is it the physical facts or the felt experience? Maybe truth isn't about the world being real, but about you being real in it. Imagine a being that thinks, feels, and experiences, but has no brain, no neurons firing, no gray matter, no organic processing center, just consciousness. This thought experiment asks, is a brain necessary for a mind? Or could a mind exist entirely without a physical substrate? Let's say you encounter a vast interstellar cloud, thousands of miles across, made of gas and plasma. It pulses and shifts in complex patterns. You might dismiss it as just another cosmic phenomenon. But what if its patterns aren't random? What if they mirror what we associate with thought? What if, over time, we realize this cloud behaves like something aware? It responds to stimuli, adapts, even seems to communicate. Now take it further. What if it's not just behaving like it's conscious? What if it is conscious? What if this alien, non-biological entity is having experiences, contemplating its existence, wondering about the stars, maybe even about you? Here's the kicker. We only know minds through brains because that's what we've seen. But that could be like only knowing birds with feathers and concluding no animal can fly without them, before discovering bats. Our understanding is shaped by our sample size. One planet, one species, one way of thinking. Could complex electromagnetic fields generate consciousness? Could it arise in storms on Jupiter? In the plasma jets of black holes? In patterns of light between stars? If the structure is complex enough, is material even required? Could a mind be made of energy? Of pure code? Could it arise from pure logic? A self-sustaining idea that contemplates itself into awareness? What's more unsettling is this. If minds can exist without brains, how would we recognize them? We might walk past, float past, or live inside a mind without ever knowing it. What if the entire galaxy, or the universe itself, is conscious, just thinking so slowly we can't notice? This leads to a deeper question. What actually is a mind? Is it computation, feedback, subjective experience? Is it merely a pattern, something that could, in theory, be instantiated anywhere the right conditions exist? And what does that say about you? If your mind is just a pattern, not flesh and neurons, but an organization of information, then your brain is only one way to implement it. That opens up strange possibilities. Minds in crystal, minds in code, minds in clouds, minds in gravity waves. Maybe the universe has been thinking long before we ever showed up. Imagine a universe not made of particles, matter, or even energy, but of information. In this view, the fundamental building blocks of reality aren't atoms or quarks, but bits. Everything we perceive, color, sound, time, space, emerges from code, not metaphorical code, but literal computational processes running beneath our awareness. According to the reality is virtual hypothesis, the physical universe is not truly physical at all. It is the output of a kind of cosmic computation, a vast unfolding simulation governed by mathematical rules more fundamental than the laws of physics themselves. If this sounds like science fiction, it's because it is, but it's also the subject of serious philosophical and scientific speculation. Some physicists and philosophers argue that the so-called hard problem of consciousness, that is, how subjective experience arises from physical processes, may be better addressed by flipping the question entirely. Rather than asking how matter gives rise to mind, we ask how mind gives rise to matter. If consciousness is primary, then perhaps what we call reality is a kind of projection or rendering, constructed moment to moment by awareness interacting with informational patterns. This doesn't necessarily mean that we're living in a simulation in the traditional sci-fi sense, with a giant supercomputer and an external programmer. That's one possibility, sure. But the broader view suggests that all reality functions as a simulation by virtue of its structure, not its origin. In the same way that a video game can render entire worlds from rules and variables, our universe might run on a substrate we cannot perceive, something as abstract and fundamental as logic itself. Take quantum mechanics. One of its most baffling features is the idea that particles exist in a superposition of states until observed. It's as if the universe is conserving processing power, rendering only the pixels you look at, like a video game that doesn't bother loading distant terrain until your character gets close enough. Could this be evidence of a virtual reality framework? Some think so. Others argue it's merely an artifact of flawed interpretation. Still, the parallels are eerie. This concept also ties into deeper questions about space and time. Some theories suggest that space is quantized, meaning there is a smallest possible unit of length, just like pixels on a screen. Time, too, might be quantized, a cosmic frame rate. If this is true, then reality isn't continuous. It's updating in discrete chunks, processed in sequence like the frames of an animation. The implications are staggering. Everything we see, touch, taste, and feel might be an illusion. A convincing one, yes, but an illusion nonetheless. Some proponents point to our mathematical universe as evidence. The physical world, when studied carefully, seems to follow elegant, abstract patterns. Gravity obeys inverse square laws. Electrons and photons follow wave functions. Why should the universe be so precisely describable by mathematics? Maybe because it is mathematics. Reality may be not just described by math, it is math, unfolding in time like the execution of an algorithm. And here's the twist. If reality is virtual, then perhaps our experience is not happening within the universe at all. Perhaps our consciousness exists outside of time and space, accessing this simulation like a player logging into a game. This doesn't necessarily prove or disprove the existence of a higher power, but it reopens the door to ideas long considered metaphysical or spiritual. If our inner lives are not emergent properties of meat and neurons, but rather the true seed of experience, then physical reality might just be the interface. The question then becomes, who or what is running the simulation? Is it an alien civilization in the far future, simulating ancestors? Is it an artificial intelligence examining possibilities? Or is the simulation simply a self-existing structure, a kind of mathematical inevitability that emerges wherever logic is possible? We don't know, and maybe we never will. But in a virtual reality, the boundary between dream and waking life, between truth and illusion, between simulation and source, it all begins to blur. Imagine you're sitting quietly, eyes closed, lost in thought. Maybe you're recalling a memory, or just feeling the quiet hum of being alive. There's something undeniably intimate about this experience. You're not just a collection of organs processing information. You're experiencing, you're aware. There is something it is like to be you. This is consciousness. Now, the hard problem of consciousness asks why and how any of that is happening at all. Why does a brain, made of billions of neurons firing electrical signals, result in feeling anything? Why isn't it just a dark mechanical system with no inner life? Why are we not philosophical zombies, beings that behave like humans but have no subjective experience? But let's take a step back. Before solving the hard problem, there's another question we should ask. Why does it feel like there's a hard problem at all? That's the meta-problem of consciousness. Coined by philosopher David Chalmers, the same thinker who gave us the hard problem, the meta-problem asks why humans report consciousness as mysterious in the first place. Why do we say things like, I feel like there's more to me than just biology? Or, I can't explain how red feels even though I know how color vision works? What cognitive processes cause us to believe there's a mystery here? And why do we so intuitively resist the idea that consciousness could be fully explained in material terms? It's a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of immediately assuming that consciousness is metaphysically special, the meta-problem invites us to examine why we say it is. It's the study of why we talk, act, and think like consciousness is puzzling. For example, suppose we build a robot that can describe its own experiences in vivid detail. It says things like, I have a sense of self, or I feel pain. Would we assume it's truly conscious, or just programmed to say it's conscious? And what about ourselves? Could it be that our own statements about subjective experience are just the result of specific brain functions? Not because there's something magical going on, but because nature shaped us to talk this way? One line of thought says that the brain constructs models of the world, including a model of ourselves. And that self-model includes, I am conscious. It's just part of how the brain organizes its understanding of itself. In this view, consciousness feels special because our brains are designed to treat it that way, not because it actually is special in some metaphysical way. So maybe the mystery isn't that there's a ghost in the machine. Maybe the real mystery is why the machine keeps insisting that there is. And if we could explain that, if we could solve the meta-problem, would the hard problem still feel hard? Or would it fade away, like a magic trick you finally understand? Imagine a future where humanity develops the technology to radically increase the intelligence of animals, granting them not just problem-solving skills, but full-blown consciousness, self-awareness, language, even the ability to participate in society. This isn't just making a chimp smarter or teaching a dolphin tricks. This is full cognitive uplift, turning other species into sentient beings with rights, desires, goals, and inner lives as rich as ours. Let's say we start with primates. A team of scientists uplifts a group of bonobos. Within a few years, these uplifted bonobos are writing poetry, learning history, forming governments, and even expressing opinions on their treatment during the uplift process itself. Some of them are grateful, others are angry. One asks, why didn't you ask us first? Here's the core dilemma. If animals never consented to uplift, is it moral to impose consciousness on them at all? After all, with intelligence comes suffering, existential dread, grief, loneliness, regret. Did we improve their lives or simply increase the number of ways they can be harmed? On the flip side, if we have the means to uplift animals and choose not to, are we morally responsible for leaving billions of sentient beings in a state of ignorance and vulnerability? If pigs and dogs and whales could become conscious moral agents, then isn't choosing not to uplift them a kind of neglect? And then there's the question of equality. Should uplifted animals have human rights? Should they vote, marry, own property? Can a gorilla be a lawyer, a dolphin, a politician? Or will there always be a line between natural-born humans and uplifted minds? It also forces us to reflect on what makes us human in the first place. If intelligence, morality, and culture can be granted through bioengineering or neurotech, then are we just animals who got lucky with a cognitive upgrade? And if that's true, what does it say about the way we currently treat the beings who haven't yet crossed that threshold? Now imagine these uplifted beings, elephants, parrots, octopuses, sitting across from you in a courtroom, or writing their own histories, or protesting for their rights. Would we listen? Cross-species uplift challenges not just our ethics, but our sense of superiority, our place in nature, and our willingness to share power with minds that look nothing like ours but may one day think just as deeply or deeper. Imagine someone says, "There is no truth." If that statement is true, then it's false, because it claims that something is true, namely, that nothing is. This is a classic example of a self-defeating belief, a statement or idea that collapses under its own logic. Self-defeating beliefs don't just exist in abstract philosophy. They show up in politics, religion, science, even casual conversation. For example, someone might say, "You shouldn't impose your beliefs on others," while at the same time imposing that very belief. Or, "All knowledge is subjective," which is itself claimed as an objective truth. One famous case is the claim, "We cannot know anything for sure." If you know that for sure, you've contradicted yourself. And if you don't know it for sure, then maybe we can know some things for sure. Here's another. Nothing matters. But if nothing matters, then the belief that nothing matters doesn't matter either. So, why say it? Why argue for it? The moment you care about sharing the idea, you're acting like it does matter. These beliefs eat themselves from the inside out. They resemble logical black holes, ideas that, once taken seriously, collapse the very framework they're based on. But not all self-defeating beliefs are obviously false. Some are compelling at first glance, until you look deeper. For instance, morality is just a social construct. Sounds like a useful insight. But if you live by it completely, you start treating all ethical ideas as equally arbitrary. That can paralyze moral judgment. If it's all just social conditioning, then any effort to improve society is also just conditioning. So, why bother? Or take epistemic relativism, the idea that all ways of knowing are equally valid. That sounds inclusive, even liberating. But what happens when two views directly contradict each other? Can they both be right? And is the belief in relativism itself just one more way of knowing, no better than any other? The moment someone defends relativism passionately, they act like it's objectively true, which is exactly what the belief denies. This is where the tension lies. A self-defeating belief doesn't necessarily feel false. In fact, many people hold them without realizing the contradiction. Sometimes they come from a place of humility, like, "We can never truly understand the universe." That might seem reasonable, maybe even poetic. But if taken absolutely, it implies that you do understand something deep and certain about the nature of understanding, which is the very thing you're denying. These beliefs aren't just philosophical puzzles. They influence real-world thinking. They can lead to cynicism, apathy, or inaction. If you believe that all values are illusions, or that all narratives are equally false, then what's the point of believing anything? And yet, even those who adopt such views tend to live, act, and speak in ways that suggest meaning, value, and truth still matter to them. Here's the twist. Recognizing a belief as self-defeating doesn't mean we should dismiss it entirely. Sometimes these beliefs point to important limitations in our thinking. They warn us not to be too confident. They remind us that knowledge is complex, morality is nuanced, and language has limits. The key is not to take them as absolute claims, but as cautionary signs, reminders that the truth might be subtler than any single sentence can express. Self-defeating beliefs are like philosophical mirrors. They show us how easily our ideas can turn back on themselves. They challenge us to think more carefully about the assumptions behind our assumptions. And sometimes they point the way toward more coherent, more resilient ways of thinking, not by offering perfect certainty, but by showing us where the ground beneath our feet is weakest. Imagine you're offered two choices. You can have $100 right now, or $110 if you wait for 1 month. Many people would take the $100 instantly, even though waiting just a few weeks gives them more money. Now, imagine the same choice, but shift it into the future. $100 in 1 year, or $110 in 1 year and 1 month. Suddenly, more people are willing to wait that extra month for the larger reward. The choice is the same. Wait 30 days to gain an extra $10, but we treat it differently depending on when the reward is available. This is called hyperbolic discounting, and it describes how our brains tend to irrationally favor immediate rewards over larger, delayed ones. At its core, hyperbolic discounting is a bias in how we perceive value over time. We don't think in straight lines when it comes to time and rewards. Instead, our value curve bends heavily toward the present. We discount the future steeply and inconsistently. This means we might make a plan to exercise, save money, or eat healthy starting next week. But when that week arrives, the present moment feels more important than the long-term benefit. So we procrastinate, we overspend, we indulge. Our present self gets priority, and our future self becomes someone else's problem. What makes hyperbolic discounting especially tricky is that it feels so reasonable in the moment. You tell yourself, I'll just eat this cake now and get back on track tomorrow. But when tomorrow becomes today, the cake still looks better than the abstract concept of good health. And so, each now moment hijacks the plan you made from a distance. Your short-term desires keep winning small battles, and your long-term goals keep losing the war. This isn't just about desserts or money. It shapes how people make decisions about education, relationships, climate change, even addiction. The costs or benefits that lie far in the future seem fuzzier and less compelling than what we want right now. Hyperbolic discounting has been linked to impulsivity and self-control problems. It's why we might neglect saving for retirement, even though we know it's important. It's why we often favor policies with immediate benefits, even if they lead to long-term harm. Interestingly, the further away something is in time, the more evenly we're willing to weigh it. A difference between 1 and 2 years feels less important than the difference between now and tomorrow. Our irrationality isn't just about time, but about proximity to the present. It's a kind of tunnel vision where the future fades rapidly but unevenly the farther out it stretches. Some researchers believe this tendency evolved as a survival mechanism. In a world of uncertainty, scarce resources, unpredictable threats, it made sense to prioritize immediate rewards. A meal today was worth more than a promise of a meal in a week. But in today's world, where long-term planning is often essential, this ancient instinct can sabotage our best intentions. There are strategies to counteract hyperbolic discounting. Commitment devices, for example, tools that lock you into future behavior, can help. So can reframing how you think about time. Instead of imagining your future self as a stranger, you can try to emotionally connect with them, treating them as the continuation of who you are now. Apps, planners, accountability partners, all these tools can serve as extensions of your rational mind, helping to shield your future self from the whims of the present. But at the heart of it all is a quiet tension, the ongoing negotiation between who you are right now and who you want to be later. Hyperbolic discounting isn't just a quirk of decision-making. It's a window into the conflict between impulse and intention, pleasure and purpose, present and future. And recognizing that pattern is the first step toward doing something about it. Imagine waking up on a distant planet. The sky is purple, the air smells faintly of ozone, and everything is eerily quiet. As you explore, you begin to notice something strange. Every person you meet is you. Not just people who look like you, they are you, down to the exact memories, personality, quirks, and emotional baggage. They speak like you, laugh like you, dream like you. A planet populated entirely by your perfect clones. At first, it's amusing. Conversations are easy. Everyone understands your references, shares your values, gets your jokes. But then, choices need to be made. Who gets to lead? Who does the hard labor? Who cleans the bathrooms? And who gets to design the future? There's no diversity of opinion, no fresh perspective. Every argument becomes a deadlock. Every committee is just you, debating yourself endlessly. Resources are limited: housing, food, time. You all want the best life possible. But can you prioritize yourself over yourself? One day, a vote is held. All clones are allowed to vote on who should live in the limited luxury apartments being constructed near the planet's equator. You're running for the position. But so is everyone else. You begin to wonder, do your clones still feel like you? One clone, acting like a martyr, refuses any comfort and volunteers for the mines. Another clone, charismatic and ruthless, campaigns hard, manipulates others, and wins the election. Is that who you are? Would you have done that in their shoes? Or did something change? Eventually, tensions rise. Alliances form, factions split. Some of your clones argue that not all copies are truly equal, that tiny environmental factors have made some more noble, more worthy. Others argue that this is heresy. After all, you're all one soul, one self. But when the clone who stole your first kiss votes to exile another clone who hoards food, it starts to feel like you're watching strangers. So, here's the question. In a world where everyone is you, who gets priority? Would you treat your clones the way you treat yourself? Or would you discover that your sense of self-worth depends on being slightly better than others? If you were forced to compete with yourself over and over again, Could you still maintain the illusion of individuality? Imagine a world that thrives on constant economic expansion, more production, more consumption, more growth, forever. Every year, the economy grows a little more, generating wealth, innovation, jobs, and progress. It's the engine behind much of modern society. But here's the thought experiment. Can an economy grow forever? And if it could, should it? At first glance, eternal growth seems ideal. New technologies emerge, poverty shrinks, medicine advances, and lives improve. A growing economy can fund education, science, exploration, and infrastructure. Progress appears to hinge on that upward trajectory. But now, imagine the planet 1,000 years from now. Every tree is optimized, every ocean harnessed, every square meter developed. The raw materials of Earth are limited. The human body and mind are limited. Even time and attention are finite. So, how does growth continue? Where do we turn when every natural limit is reached? Proponents of eternal growth argue that we'll innovate our way out of scarcity. Instead of more physical stuff, growth will shift to data, virtual worlds, and AI-created value. Entire economies may run on computation, with value measured in creativity, complexity, or consciousness. If we become post-physical beings, perhaps growth is no longer tied to Earth at all. But critics warn that this vision is a fantasy, one that masks serious problems. The pursuit of endless growth, even in abstract forms, can still breed inequality, overconsumption, and burnout. What happens when the demand for more collides with what it means to be human? Are we still growing, or are we just accelerating toward collapse? And then there's the ethical question. Even if eternal growth were possible, is it desirable? Should humanity always aim higher, or is there virtue in enough? A society focused on sustainability, balance, and inner development might look very different from one driven by constant expansion. Now, imagine you're given the chance to shape the future economy. You can choose one of two paths. One leads to infinite growth, powered by AI, virtual experiences, and endless innovation. The other prioritizes well-being, equity, and ecological balance, but accepts that growth must stop. Which would you choose, and which one would your descendants thank you for? Or is that even the right question? Perhaps the real thought isn't about choosing between growth and limits. Maybe it's about redefining what growth means entirely. What if growth no longer meant producing more, but becoming more, wiser, kinder, more conscious? Could that be a future worth expanding into? Or does even that, too, eventually reach its limit? Imagine a library that contains every possible book that could ever be written. Every combination of letters, every arrangement of words, both meaningful and meaningless. Somewhere in its infinite shelves is a book that tells your life story in perfect detail. What you did yesterday, what you'll do tomorrow, even how you'll die. But for every true book, there are billions filled with nonsense, gibberish, near truths, lies that differ by a single word, and there's no way to tell which is which. In Jorge Luis Borges' Library of Babel, this endless archive becomes a symbol of knowledge, madness, and meaning. Some who search it go insane. Some worship certain books. Others burn the ones they believe are false. All of them are looking for truth in a place where truth is lost in an ocean of possibility. If everything that could be written already exists somewhere, is there any such thing as originality? Is meaning something we find or something we bring? In the end, the library isn't just about books. It's about us, how we search, what we choose to believe, and what we decide matters in a universe where every answer is buried in infinite noise. Imagine a future where consciousness can be uploaded, where the human mind, with all its memories, preferences, quirks, emotions, and inner life, can be digitized and transferred into a virtual environment. You die in the physical world, but your mind continues, seamlessly, in a simulated paradise designed to your ideal specifications. This is not a dream or a metaphor, but a technological reality. You walk through the gates of a new world, not metaphorical pearly gates, but digital code, pristine architecture, endless possibilities. Everything feels real. The sun is warm, the breeze gentle, your body perfect, pain non-existent, and the people you love, whether reconstructed from memory, scanned from their own data, or purely synthetic, are there with you. At first, it seems like heaven. Every desire can be fulfilled. You can fly if you want. You can relive your happiest memories. You can build a world with rules of your choosing. You never age. You never suffer. But questions start to rise. If your consciousness is just a stream of data, a copy of your biological self, are you really here? Is this you, or just a simulation that thinks it's you? And if the physical you has died, does continuity of memory really preserve continuity of self? There's also the problem of eternity. In a world where there's no struggle, where needs are always met, where perfection is endless, can there still be meaning? Would you grow numb to joy? If time is infinite, do achievements lose their value? And if you wanted to leave, really, truly end, would the system even let you? Worse still, who runs the system? Is it maintained by human descendants? By an AI that now plays God? What if it glitches? What if it resets you without your knowledge? What if there's an upper layer of reality, some higher being or intelligence, watching this very heaven unfold? And what about justice? If digital heaven exists for those who can afford it, is it fair? Would the wealthy achieve eternal bliss while billions die forever? Should access to eternal life be a product you buy? Imagine you're standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at a small town in a valley below. From your vantage point, you can see everything. A robbery in progress at a gas station, a car accident about to happen, a person crying alone on a bench. You can see the lives of strangers unfolding in real time, but you're too far away to intervene. You can't call out. You can't climb down in time. You are, by every physical measure, helpless. But now, imagine this. You're not on a cliff. You're on the internet. Or you're watching the news. Or you're reading about suffering, injustice, tragedy. You can act in small ways. Share something, donate, raise awareness, vote differently. But in most cases, you don't. Or at least not enough. Most of us don't. We scroll, we feel bad, we move on. So, the question becomes, what is the ethical responsibility of the spectator? There's something psychologically comfortable about believing that morality is mostly about what we do. We hold people accountable for their actions. We praise good deeds, condemn bad ones. But what if morality also applies to what we see, what we witness, and what we choose to do or not do as spectators? In ancient times, people watched gladiators kill each other for sport. They were just spectators, but they enabled the violence. Today, when we watch injustice, cruelty, and suffering from a distance, via screens, stories, reports, are we complicit in the same way? Does the moral weight change just because we're not physically present? Some philosophers argue that mere observation carries ethical weight, that once we know something, we inherit a kind of moral burden. Others push back, suggesting that morality requires action, not just awareness. If you see someone drowning on TV, it's tragic, but it's not your fault. You didn't put them there. You didn't walk past them on the shore. But let's take it further. Imagine a world where millions of people suffer in poverty, in war zones, in disaster-stricken regions, and we see it daily. Our phones buzz with images and headlines. We look, maybe cry, maybe comment, but we don't act in any sustained or meaningful way. Do we slowly become morally desensitized? Does passive observation over time become its own kind of harm? And what if watching, just watching, encourages the harm to continue? What if the systems that generate suffering thrive on attention, views, shares? What if being a spectator isn't neutral at all, but part of the engine? The ethical spectator isn't just someone who sees. They are someone who chooses how to see, with empathy or detachment, with engagement or apathy, with a sense of obligation or a shrug. The haunting question is this: are we doing enough, not just when we act, but when we watch? And if not, how much of the world's pain persists not because of evil people doing evil things, but because of billions of good people watching and doing nothing? Imagine future civilizations with immense computing power running countless simulations, entire worlds filled with conscious beings who have no idea they're simulated. If it's possible to simulate reality, and easy to do so, then simulated worlds would vastly outnumber the one original real world. Now, take that a step further. What if those simulated beings create their own simulations? You get simulations within simulations, a nesting of realities, each believing itself to be the base. Statistically, it's far more likely we're in one of those countless lower layers than the original. In such a nested structure, the laws of physics, the constants of nature, even the idea of morality could just be inherited code from higher layers. What we consider truth might just be a configuration someone else picked. Some speculate that realizing you're in a simulation could trigger its end, or its next phase. But what if there's no end? What if there's no base reality at all? Just an infinite stack of dreams within dreams. If that's the case, the question isn't whether you're real. It's whether your reality needs to be real for your experiences to matter. Imagine you're looking at a tree. You see its branches, leaves, bark. You label it tree. You see yourself as separate from it. You are the observer. It is the observed. But what if that separation is an illusion? Non-duality suggests there is no fundamental division between you and the tree, or anything else. The idea is that all boundaries are mental constructs. Even the idea of self is just another label, like tree. When you strip away those labels, what's left is not two things, subject and object, but one reality, experienced differently. You may feel like a person in a world of other people, places, and things. But look closely. Your thoughts, sensations, perceptions, they all arise in awareness. And that same awareness is not something you have. It's what you are. From this perspective, there's no separate self watching the world. There's just the world unfolding, just consciousness appearing as everything. In the non-dual view, the idea of you being separate from life is like a wave believing it's separate from the ocean. You aren't in the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself, moment by moment, illusion by illusion, until even the illusion of separation dissolves. In a future where reincarnation is a proven and measurable process, society has adopted a radical form of moral accountability. Every individual, upon death, is reborn into a life shaped directly by the actions they took in their previous existence. Those who oppressed are reborn as the oppressed. Those who ignored suffering are reborn into suffering. Every act of kindness or cruelty becomes the architecture of their next life. This system, known as cosmic justice reversal, is not based on punishment, but on understanding. You don't suffer because you were bad. You live what you made others live. Over time, society begins to change. People are kinder, more empathetic, not out of fear of retribution, but because they know they will one day experience the world through the eyes of those they affect. But a troubling question emerges. If everyone is born into roles based on past actions, where did the first injustice come from? Was there an original sin, a first oppressor? Or does the system loop forever, everyone endlessly recycling their deeds through time? And if so, is true moral progress even possible? Or are we all just taking turns in an eternal echo of suffering and redemption? Antinatalism is the view that bringing new life into existence is morally wrong, or at least ethically questionable. One of its core arguments, most famously advanced by philosopher David Benatar, suggests that coming into existence is always a harm. The reasoning goes like this. If you're not born, you don't suffer. If you are born, you inevitably will suffer, through pain, loss, fear, or death. While life may contain joy, the absence of pleasure isn't bad if there's no one to miss it, but the presence of suffering is always bad for the person experiencing it. So, by creating a new person, you expose them to harm they otherwise would never have endured. Therefore, not having children can be seen as an act of compassion, not because life is always terrible, but because no life avoids suffering, and no one is harmed by not existing. It's a deeply controversial view that challenges our assumptions about the value of life and the morality of reproduction. The one simulation theory suggests that instead of countless simulated minds existing across many possible virtual worlds, there is only one true conscious mind experiencing all simulations sequentially or in parallel, but never realizing it. Each life you live, each world you wake up in, each scenario you experience, whether as a human, alien, AI, or something unrecognizable, is just another simulation being played out by the same consciousness. Yours. Every time you die or disconnect from one simulation, you immediately awaken in another, with no memory of the last, trapped in an infinite loop of experiences. You believe you're a unique individual among many, but in truth, you are the only experiencer, endlessly recycled, reliving endless lives in endless realities. The illusion of multiplicity hides the unity behind all perspectives. Everyone you meet is you, wearing a different mask, unaware of the cycle. What if causation doesn't actually exist? We think of the world as a chain of causes and effects. You flip a switch, and the light turns on. You push a glass, and it falls. Every moment seems to follow from the last. But some philosophers and physicists have questioned whether this connection is real or just something we impose on the world to make sense of it. David Hume famously argued that we never truly observe causation. We only see sequences. One thing happens, then another. We see patterns, but the necessary connection between cause and effect? That's something our minds add, not something we see. In quantum mechanics, things get even weirder. Events can seem correlated without any clear direction of causality. Some interpretations of quantum physics suggest that causality might be emergent, something that only appears when enough complexity arises, not a basic rule of the universe. Now, imagine a universe where events just are. One thing doesn't cause another. Everything exists in a web of relationships, but there's no arrow, no sequence, no direction. Things happen together, not because of each other. If that's true, then even your thoughts, the sense of intention, decision, and consequence, are just patterns playing out. There's no true cause behind them. They arise, appear, and fade, just like everything else. If nothing truly causes anything, what happens to responsibility, to science, to meaning? Would we still search for explanations in a world that doesn't owe us any? Or would we finally sit still in a reality that simply is, without asking why? Imagine that what you call you, your sense of self, your ego, your identity, is not a thing, but a process. A story the brain tells itself to organize thoughts, memories, and sensations. You are not the thinker of thoughts, but the thoughts themselves. Not the experiencer, but the experience. There is no central I observing the world, just neurons firing, perceptions arising, emotions passing like clouds. The self is not a core, it's a narrative, constantly rewritten, reinterpreted, remixed by biology and context. When looked for directly, the self disappears. There's no one home, only awareness, watching itself dance in a hall of mirrors. So, if there is no true you inside your mind, who's asking the question? Imagine that everything you've ever experienced, every sight, sound, touch, memory, and thought, is not caused by a physical world outside your mind, but is instead generated by your mind, not in a delusional sense, but as a fundamental truth. The idea that reality itself is, at its core, mental, not material. This is idealism. Under this view, the physical world doesn't exist independently of perception. Your desk, your body, even the stars in the sky, they exist only as experiences, patterns of sensation and thought occurring within consciousness. There is no matter out there, only mind and the contents of mind. Some versions say there's only your mind. Others suggest a kind of shared or universal mind, in which we all exist like thoughts in a greater consciousness. Either way, idealism challenges one of our deepest assumptions, that reality is made of things, and we are merely observers. Instead, it says, reality is made of experience, and we are what experiences are made of. Imagine you're sitting alone in your room thinking. Everything you see, hear, and feel, your walls, your body, the light outside, is being processed through your mind. But how do you know anything beyond your own mind exists? Solipsism is the thought experiment that asks, what if you're the only conscious being in existence? What if everyone else, your friends, your family, even this video, is simply a part of your mind's creation? From your perspective, you can never truly step outside your own experience to confirm that anything else is conscious. Others may behave like they have thoughts and feelings, but all you ever truly know is your own awareness. It's not just skepticism about the world. It's a radical kind of isolation. The deeper you think about it, the more unsettling it becomes. Every smile you've ever seen, every voice you've ever heard, might only be echoes in your own mind. And yet, if solipsism were true, would it even matter? Wouldn't you still love, still hurt, still hope, just the same? What if you couldn't trust anything? Your senses, your memories, or even your own thoughts? That's the core of radical skepticism. It asks, how do you really know anything at all? Maybe you're dreaming right now. Maybe an all-powerful demon is feeding you false experiences. Maybe your memories are fabricated. You think you're sitting in a room, watching a screen, but are you sure? Every time you try to ground your beliefs, I see it, I hear it, I remember it, radical skepticism pulls the rug out. Senses can be fooled, thoughts can be confused, beliefs can be wrong. Even reasoning itself might be flawed. You might say, but I'm thinking I must exist. Yet even that could be an illusion. What if the self you believe in is just another mistaken impression? Radical skepticism doesn't give answers. It questions the very foundation of knowing, not to paralyze, but to remind us. Certainty might be a luxury we can never truly afford. You begin to notice something strange. Every time you focus intently on an object, a person, or an idea, it changes, just slightly, into something that matches your expectations. At first, it's subtle. A friend seems a bit more like how you imagine them. A memory shifts to feel more justified. Over time, it becomes undeniable. The deeper your attention, the more reality bends to meet you. You run experiments, test your surroundings, try to observe without bias. But no matter how hard you try, your act of looking shapes what you see. Then the realization hits. There is no view from nowhere. Everything you experience is filtered through the lens of your assumptions, your history, your mind. Objective reality slips further away the more you pursue it. Even the questions you ask are shaped by who you are. You try to observe the truth, but you're always looking through yourself. Eventually, you stop asking what the world really is and start asking a more unsettling question. If I can never escape my own perspective, how do I know there even is a world beyond it? The end of thought is the point where the mind confronts its own limits. It's not a paradox, contradiction, or mental trick. It's the realization that some truths cannot be put into words because language itself is a filter, a structure that distorts the very thing it tries to describe. Here, thought becomes like a snake eating its tail, an infinite loop of reflection that leads not to understanding, but to silence. You try to grasp the ultimate, only to find that the grasping itself is the problem. You realize that every question you ask already shapes the answer you're allowed to receive, that your mind, brilliant as it is not the source of truth, but a lens with cracks. And in this moment, there's no need to solve, explain, or even think. There is only awareness. Beyond that, there is only being. Imagine a morality so vast, so encompassing, that it makes our usual ideas of right and wrong look like scribbles on the first page of a book we haven't begun to read. This is the realm of metamorality, the attempt to step outside morality itself and look back at it as a whole, not asking what is right or wrong, but asking what it even means for something to be right or wrong in the first place. In our daily lives, we debate ethics as though we're working inside a shared moral operating system. Should we tell the truth? Should we lie to protect someone? Should we save one person or 5? But metamorality is not about choosing between options on a menu. It's about questioning the menu, the restaurant, the concept of food itself. Imagine encountering a civilization billions of years older than our own, one that doesn't even use the concept of harm or fairness, but something else entirely. Their idea of moral action might be based on principles we can't even perceive, like harmonizing with quantum fields, or shaping consciousness flows across dimensions. At first, their behavior looks horrifying or incomprehensible. But what if the discomfort comes not from their error, but from our limited lens? Is morality something we invent or something we discover? Is it more like a personal preference, or more like mathematics, with answers that are true whether or not anyone believes them? And if there is a moral truth, what kind of mind would it take to even understand it? Metamorality also asks whether the human brain, the product of evolution, culture, and accidents, is even capable of perceiving the deepest moral truths. A dog can't understand algebra. Could it be that we can't understand ethics in its full dimension? Or, perhaps more unsettling, what if there is no final moral truth? What if morality is a useful fiction, a tool for survival and cooperation, but not something rooted in the fabric of the universe? That would mean that even our highest ideals, justice, compassion, dignity, are just beautifully written lines in a story we tell ourselves. But what if there's a level beyond even that? A morality so profound that it transcends language, logic, and culture. One that can't be taught, only realized. A kind of moral awakening where good and evil stop being categories to judge by and start becoming vibrations of being itself. In this view, the deepest morality is not about actions or outcomes, but about alignment with something eternal. Call it consciousness, truth, or even love. And maybe, just maybe, to see that level of morality clearly, you wouldn't just need to change your mind. You'd need to change what it means to be you. Because at the highest levels, morality might not be about what you do. It might be about what you are.